It's crappie jig time. And don't worry, because this one that was in my nose is not going into the giveaway box. If you haven't heard, I'm stockpiling custom hand-tied jigs for a variety of species to do a big giveaway at 5,000 subscribers, and the goal is 100 hand-tied jigs. So if you're interested in winning a butt ton of custom hand-tied jigs, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you get notified when the giveaway goes live. Today we're going to be tying a jig with a fire tiger color pattern, but with a woven chenille technique that creates stripes which are reminiscent of those you would find on a bumblebee. So I'm calling it fire bee, or bumble tiger, the fire bee. Fire bee sounds better. And today we're tying on a 1/16 ounce freestyle sickle hook jig head by Ramble Tamble Tackle. And this one is called the Psycho pattern. And I'll put a link to these jig heads as well as all of the other materials that we're going to be using today down in the description. We're going to be tying today with some Danville 210 denier flat wax nylon thread. And to start, we're just going to lay down a base layer of thread from the jig head all the way down to the start of the hook bend. And next we're going to tie in the tail, and it's going to be this UV2 marabou feather in fluorescent chartreuse color. To prepare the feather to be tied in, we just want to stroke those barbs to the top of the feather, and we want to create a tail that is about equal to the length of the hook. Once we have that desired length, we'll go ahead and position that atop the hook shank, and we'll tie that in right where we stopped our thread. We'll make one loose wrap just to capture that feather on the top of the shank. And right now I'm pinching on both sides of that hook shank just to make sure I keep my feather on the top of the hook shank. Next I'll make a couple of tighter wraps just to make sure we lock in that position. And then we can start making our wraps around that feather, moving up toward the jig head. And the feather can tend to get in your way, but just use your free hand to kind of keep it into position as you make your way up to the front of that jig head. Once we get close to that head, I'm just going to twist up what remains of our feather here. And that'll just help for a cleaner cut. And then we'll take our scissors and we'll trim that feather as close as we can to that hook shank. And now we'll go ahead and make some additional wraps, and we'll work to trap those barbs of the marabou feather to the best of our ability. And then we'll work our thread back about 1/8 of an inch away from that tail. Next, we're going to tie into our tail a couple strands of flash, and this is a pearl UV flash, but it has a green iridescent shimmer to it. So I'll take my strand of flash and I'm going to fold that around my thread at the midway point. And now I'll just turn my vise on its side so you guys can better see what I'm doing here. And now sliding that flash down my thread, I'm going to position that right on the side of the hook shank. And then I'm going to wrap around that back toward the tail to tie it in. Once that is tied in, I'm going to trim that flash just past the end of the marabou feather. And now I'm going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. Now that my flash is tied in, I'm going to position my thread about 1/4 inch away from the tail. And now we're going to tie in our first piece of chenille, and this is the Hairline medium-sized crystal flash chenille in pumpkin color. And this stuff is basically a perfect color match to our jig head, and it also has a green shimmer to match those eyes. So to tie this in, I'm just going to remove the fibers from the last 1/4 inch of my piece of chenille, just like that. And then we are going to trap the end of that chenille onto our hook shank and tie that in with a nice layer of thread all the way to the base of the tail. And now we are going to tie in another piece of that medium crystal flash chenille, but this time in chartreuse color. And after tying in that second piece of chenille, we just want to move our thread all the way to the front of that jig. And now I'm going to get my thread out of the way using my bobbin holder here, just like that. I'm going to move that out to the front. And now we're ready to go ahead and perform our wraps. And I'm going to start with my strand of pumpkin crystal flash chenille, and I'm going to triple wrap that around the hook shank right at the base of the tail. And just make sure I don't trap any of those marabou barbs along the way. Once those wraps are complete, I'm going to cross my pumpkin chenille over the top of our chartreuse chenille, and then I'm going to take my chartreuse chenille up and over that hook shank, and I'm going to triple wrap that right next to our first set of wraps to form our second stripe. Once those wraps are complete, I'm going to cross that chartreuse over the pumpkin and repeat that process again. And now I'm going to alternate and perform our last set of wraps with that chartreuse right up next to the head. Now I'm going to take my thread and I'm going to come underneath to capture those strands of chenille and wrap around and underneath the chenille again, and then a couple times in front of the chenille. And first I'm going to trim that pumpkin strand of chenille as close as possible to that jig head. And now I'm going to flip this over and just inspect to make sure I don't have any strands of that pumpkin showing through that first chartreuse stripe. Now I'm just going to capture that strand of chenille one more time. Wrap in front a couple of times. And now we can go ahead and cut that last strand of chartreuse chenille right up next to that jig head. And now I'm going to finish up with a 5-turn whip finish. And then we'll go ahead and snip our thread right up under that jig head. And that's just a super cool little technique for creating that striped two-tone body. You can do that with really any number of materials or different colors. I encourage you guys to experiment. You could even tie a very realistic bumblebee pattern if that's what you're into. I think this vibrant pattern is going to be killer in stained water situations, and in the springtime may even catch some bass on this thing. As a reminder, I will leave links down in the description to all of the materials used today. And I get all my materials from the Caddis Fly Shop. They have a huge selection, but the very best part about the Caddis Fly Shop is that they offer free shipping on orders over $75. There are a lot of sites where you can buy fly tying materials, but this is the only one I could find that had both a huge selection and offered free shipping on bulk orders. And if you guys are into jig or fly tying, then you probably know there aren't many orders you're gonna place that are under $75. So you're gonna save a lot on that shipping if you go through Caddis Fly Shop. That's why I do it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye.